The moment my son pressed my hand under the dinner table, I knew something was wrong. It wasn't random. It wasn't nervous. It was deliberate. 3 squeezes. Short. Controlled. Intentional. Most people wouldn't notice it. But I did. Because it was our signal. We created it when he was 7 years old, a silent code that meant, I need help. Get me out of this. He was 31 now. And he hadn't used it in over 20 years. Yet here we were, sitting in my dining room, across from a woman named Alicia Drummond. She smiled as she spoke, holding her wine glass with effortless confidence. I work with private clients, she said smoothly. Mostly helping them reposition capital into opportunities traditional banks don't offer. Her voice was warm, practiced, inviting. My wife, Carol, leaned forward with polite interest. That sounds exciting. Alicia nodded. It can be. Especially when you know where to look. My son, Daniel, sat beside her, his posture relaxed. Too relaxed. If you didn't know him, you'd think he was completely comfortable. But his hand was still resting lightly against mine. And moments earlier, he had squeezed it 3 times. I kept my face neutral and poured more wine into Alicia's glass. I spent most of my career reviewing financial crime, I said casually. Her eyes flickered for less than a second. Most people wouldn't notice. I did. I retired about 12 years ago, I added. She smiled wider. That must have been fascinating work. It was a safe answer. Neutral. Curious. But there was something behind her eyes. Not fear. Calculation. My name is Gordon Whitaker. I'm 64 years old. I spent 24 years working financial investigations, first with provincial authorities, then later consulting on fraud cases involving investment schemes, embezzlement, and financial manipulation. I've sat across from liars who could cry on command. I've watched criminals convince families to hand over their life savings with nothing but charm and patience. And sitting across from Alicia Drummond, I felt something I hadn't felt since before retirement. Recognition. Not certainty. But possibility. Carol stood up suddenly. Alicia, would you like to see the garden? The roses are still blooming. Alicia smiled. I'd love that. The moment the back door closed behind them, Daniel leaned forward. His voice dropped. You see it too, don't you? I didn't answer immediately. Instead, I asked quietly, how long has she been living with you? He froze. That told me everything. 6 weeks, he admitted. 6 weeks. Fast. Too fast. She said her lease ended unexpectedly, he continued. It made sense at the time. At the time. That phrase always comes later. What else? I asked. He hesitated. Then said the words I already expected. She's been talking about my retirement account. There it was. Not money. Never money. Not at first. Opportunity. Optimization. Growth. The word scammers use before they ever mention numbers. She hasn't asked for anything yet, he said quickly. She's just explaining options. Options. I nodded slowly. What's the amount? He swallowed. 260,000. I felt my heart beat slow. Not faster. Slower. Because clarity removes uncertainty. And uncertainty is what creates fear. She sent me documents, he said. Investment reports. Performance charts. Everything looks legitimate. Of course it did. It always does. I leaned back in my chair. Forward them to me. He nodded. Then he asked the question he was afraid to ask. Do you think she's lying? I didn't answer right away. Because the truth was more complicated than yes or no. I think, I said carefully, we need to find out exactly who she is. Outside, through the window, I could see Alicia laughing with Carol. Relaxed. Comfortable. At home. Exactly where she wanted to be. And for the first time that evening, I realized something that made my stomach turn. She wasn't nervous. She wasn't rushing. She was waiting. And predators only wait when they're certain the trap is already set. That night, after they left, Daniel forwarded me the documents. 17 pages. Professional. Detailed. Convincing. But buried on page 12 was one line that made my blood run cold. Because I had seen it before. And the last time I saw it, 3 families lost everything. I picked up the phone and called someone I hadn't spoken to in 8 years. And when she answered, I said just 4 words. I think she's hunting. I didn't open the file immediately. Experience had taught me something most people never learn. The truth doesn't change based on how quickly you look at it. But eventually, at 11:42 p.m., sitting alone at the kitchen table, I clicked the attachment Daniel had sent. The title read, North Shore Strategic Lending Group. Private Subscription Agreement. Clean layout. Professional font. Corporate logo in navy blue. At first glance, it looked legitimate. That was the point. Fraud rarely looks like fraud. It looks like opportunity. I began reading slowly, line by line. The first 5 pages described the fund strategy. Private lending. Asset-backed credit. Infrastructure participation. Agricultural holdings. Broad language. Impressive words. No specifics. By page 8, I noticed the first problem. There was no named auditor. Every legitimate investment fund has one. Independent verification is not optional, it's the backbone of trust. This document didn't have it. Instead, it referenced something called an internal performance validation system. That phrase means nothing. It exists to sound like something. But legally, it's empty. I kept reading. Page 11 listed the business address. West Hastings Street, Vancouver. I paused and opened my laptop browser. 30 seconds later, I found it. Not an office. A mail forwarding service. You pay $40 a month, and they give you an address that makes you look like a real company. No employees. No operations. Just an illusion. I leaned back in my chair. My instincts were no longer whispering. They were speaking clearly now. But instincts aren't evidence. And evidence is what matters. At 12:16 a.m., I called someone I trusted. She answered on the second ring. Gordon. Her voice hadn't changed in 10 years. Sandra Klein. Former senior investigator. We had worked dozens of fraud cases together. I need you to check something, I said. I gave her the company name. She didn't respond immediately. I'll call you in the morning, she said. She understood. No questions. No hesitation. I slept badly that night. Not because I was unsure. Because I was almost certain. Sandra called at 9:02 a.m. Her tone was flat. Which was never a good sign. The company isn't registered, she said. I closed my eyes briefly. Anywhere? No. That confirmed it. But she wasn't finished. There's something else. I waited. The name Alicia Drummond triggered a secondary flag. My hand tightened around the phone. She worked for a licensed investment firm 5 years ago. Worked. Past tense. She was terminated, Sandra continued. For what? A pause. Then. Undisclosed financial activity involving a client. There it was. The pattern. The rehearsal. The early version of the same crime. What happened to the client? I asked. Lost $80,000. I felt something cold settle into place inside my chest. Not anger. Not yet. Clarity. Fraud isn't impulsive. It evolves. It improves. It learns from mistakes. And Alicia had clearly learned. Has she been charged before? I asked. No. That made sense too. First-time victims rarely press charges. They blame themselves. Embarrassment protects predators better than lawyers ever could. I thanked Sandra and ended the call. Then I sat there, staring at the document on my screen. 17 pages of lies. But one thing bothered me more than anything else. She wasn't rushing Daniel. She was waiting. Which meant she wasn't desperate. She was confident. And confidence like that usually means one thing. She had done this successfully before. My phone buzzed. A text from Daniel. Did you find anything? I stared at the message. There are moments in life when you realize something important. Moments when the situation stops being theoretical. This was no longer about suspicion. This was about protection. I typed back, "Yes." 3 dots appeared instantly. Then his reply, "How bad is it?" I didn't answer right away. Because the truth was heavier than he was ready for. Instead, I asked, "When is the next time you're seeing her?" He responded, "Thursday. Coffee." She said we should finalize everything. Finalize. The word echoed in my mind. Not discuss. Not explore. Finalize. She believed she had already won. And that was her first real mistake. Because she didn't know something yet. She didn't know Daniel had already chosen a side. And she definitely didn't know. We were about to let her finish the pitch. Because in fraud investigations, there is one rule that matters more than any other. You don't stop the predator before the attempt. You stop them during it. And on Thursday afternoon, sitting across from her at a small coffee shop, my son was going to do something that would change everything. He was going to press record. Thursday arrived slower than any day I could remember. Not because time had changed, but because waiting reveals the weight of things. Daniel sat across from me at his kitchen table that morning, his coffee untouched, his phone lying between us like an object neither of us fully trusted. "You don't have to do this," I told him. He shook his head. "Yes, I do." His voice wasn't emotional. It was steady. That was how I knew he had already accepted the truth. I reached across the table and picked up his phone. "Open the voice recorder." He did. "Keep it in your shirt pocket," I said. "Microphone facing up. Don't check it. Don't touch it. Just let it run." He nodded. "What if she notices?" "She won't," I said. "People like her don't look for suspicion. They look for agreement." He absorbed that quietly. Then he asked the question every victim eventually asks. Was any of it real? I didn't answer immediately. Because that's the cruelest part. The time was real, I said. The conversations were real. But the intention wasn't. He looked away. Not surprised. Just disappointed. At 2:12 p.m., he stood up. "She'll be there in 20 minutes. I walked him to the door. Before he left, I put my hand on his shoulder. "Remember," I said, "let her talk." He nodded once. Then he left. The waiting was worse than anything else. I sat in my car across the street from the coffee shop, far enough away not to be seen, close enough to see the entrance. At exactly 2:31 p.m., Alicia arrived. She stepped out of a silver sedan, calm and composed. No hesitation. No anxiety. She walked inside like someone walking toward something already decided. Daniel had arrived first. That was intentional. Control of environment matters. At 2:34 p.m., my phone buzzed. A single message. "She's here." Then nothing. Minutes stretched. Each one heavier than the last. At 3:18 p.m., the coffee shop door opened. Alicia stepped out first. She was smiling. Relaxed. Satisfied. She hugged Daniel. Not a casual hug. A lingering one. Predators use touch to reinforce trust. She walked toward her car without looking back. Daniel stood there for a moment. Then he turned and walked in the opposite direction. Toward me. When he got into the passenger seat, he didn't speak immediately. He just stared forward. "It's done," he said finally. I didn't ask what that meant. I asked the only thing that mattered. "Did you get it?" He nodded. "Yes." His hands were trembling slightly. Adrenaline leaving the body. "Tell me," I said. He exhaled slowly. "She asked for 150,000. The number hung in the air. "She said that amount qualified me for priority placement." Priority placement. Manufactured privilege. A classic tactic. "What else?" I asked. She gave me wire instructions. That was critical. Wire transfers are final. Irreversible. Designed for speed, not protection. She said the window closes Monday. Artificial urgency. Another predictable move. She told me she trusted me, he added quietly. That part mattered too. Not legally. Emotionally. Because fraud isn't built on greed. It's built on trust. He handed me the phone. The recording was 42 minutes long. More than enough. I didn't listen to it there. I didn't need to. Because I already knew what it contained. Confirmation. Evidence. Truth. But there was one thing Daniel said next that I hadn't expected. She told me something else. What? He swallowed. She said she loved me. I closed my eyes briefly. Not because I was surprised. Because I wasn't. Love is the most powerful tool fraudsters use. Not because victims are weak. Because they're human. Daniel stared at the dashboard. I almost believed her, he admitted. I put a hand on his shoulder. But you didn't, I said. That was what mattered. Not the deception. The resistance. Not the lie. The moment he chose truth. I started the engine. We're done waiting, I said. That night, I sent the recording to someone who had spent her entire career putting people like Alicia behind bars. She called me less than 12 hours later. And the first words out of her mouth were, "This isn't her first time." It was her third. And this time, she had chosen the wrong family. Sandra didn't waste time with small talk. "This isn't isolated," she said. Her voice carried the same controlled intensity one remembered from years ago. The tone she used when something crossed the line from suspicion into confirmation. I ran her name deeper, she continued. Different cities. Different identities. Same pattern. I leaned forward in my chair. How many? A pause. 3 confirmed. Possibly more. That number mattered. Fraud isn't measured in attempts. It's measured in success. What happened to the others? I asked. The first was a retired contractor, she said. 68 years old. She met him at a charity event. Built a relationship over 4 months. 4 months. That was her rhythm. Slow enough to build trust. Fast enough to avoid scrutiny. He transferred 90,000, Sandra said. The money was moved within 48 hours. Gone. I felt my jaw tighten. And the second? A divorced woman. Mid-50s. Investment was smaller. 40,000. Sandra paused. But Daniel would have been the largest. That was the truth underneath everything. This wasn't random. Daniel wasn't just another target. He was the next escalation. Predators refine their process. Each success builds confidence. Each escape builds boldness. She talked about long-term plans. Sandra asked. Yes, I said. Future investments. Shared opportunities. Sandra exhaled quietly. That's how she anchors them emotionally. Not just money. Future. Belonging. Partnership. Fraud works best when the victim believes they're building something together. What happens now? I asked. We move carefully, she said. Carefully meant strategically. Not emotionally. Daniel did everything right, she continued. The recording matters. It establishes intent. Solicitation. Misrepresentation. Intent. That's what separates suspicion from prosecution. But timing matters, Sandra added. How? We can't move too early. That surprised me. She already committed fraud, I said. Yes, Sandra replied. But if we act before she attempts the transfer, her defense becomes easier. Easier to deny. Easier to explain away. Fraud depends on ambiguity. Evidence removes ambiguity. What do you need? I asked. I need her to believe the transfer is real. I understood immediately. Confirmation. Not prevention. Because prevention protects one victim. Confirmation protects all future victims. After the call ended, I sat alone in the kitchen. Carol walked in quietly. She had been listening from the hallway. How bad? She asked. I didn't soften it. She's done this before. Carol closed her eyes briefly. Not shocked. Just processing. What about Daniel? His safe, I said. That part was true. Because Daniel had listened to his instincts. Most people don't. That's why fraud works. It doesn't overpower logic. It slowly reshapes it. My phone buzzed. A message from Daniel. She texted me. I opened it. He forwarded the message. Alicia, I'm proud of you for making this decision. This is going to change your life. I stared at the words. Not because they were convincing. Because they were familiar. I had seen versions of that sentence in case files for decades. It always came right before the transfer. Right before the disappearance. Right before the damage became permanent. Daniel sent another message. What do I say? I thought carefully before responding. Because this moment mattered. Every word mattered. I typed. Tell her you're ready. Ask for the wire instructions again. 3 dots appeared. Then disappeared. Then appeared again. Finally. Okay. I stared at the screen. This was the point of no return. Not for Daniel. For her. Because predators only succeed when no one stops them. And for the first time since she started this pattern, someone was about to stop her. The next morning, Alicia sent the wire instructions. Account number. Transit number. Recipient name. But one small detail in those instructions triggered an immediate response from Sandra. Because the account wasn't in a company's name. It was in her personal name. And that mistake was going to cost her everything. Fraud depends on distance. Distance between identity and action. Distance between the criminal and the money. That distance is what makes recovery difficult. What makes prosecution complicated. What makes victims powerless. But Alicia had made a mistake. She had given Daniel wire instructions tied to an account under her own legal name. Not a shell company. Not a corporate entity. Her. That meant confidence had begun replacing caution. And confidence is where predators become vulnerable. Sandra called me less than 10 minutes after reviewing the wire details. This is what we needed, she said. Her voice was sharper now. Focused. Are you certain the account is hers? I asked. Yes. Personal account. Credit union based in another province. She paused. She's preparing to receive the funds directly. Not eventually. Immediately. That told us something critical. She wasn't planning to maintain the illusion long term. She was planning to disappear. How fast can she move the money? I asked. Minutes, Sandra said. Once it arrives, she can split it across multiple accounts. After that, recovery becomes almost impossible. Almost. Not impossible. But close enough. What's the next step? I asked. Sandra didn't hesitate. Daniel needs to confirm the transfer. Not actually transfer it. Confirm it. Because confirmation would lock her into the attempt. Establish intent beyond argument. Intent is everything in fraud cases. Without intent, there's doubt. With intent, there's accountability. I called Daniel immediately. He answered on the first ring. She sent the instructions, he said. I know. He was quiet for a moment. Then, what do I do? I chose my words carefully. You tell her the transfer is scheduled. He exhaled slowly. Not fear. Acceptance. This part wasn't emotional anymore. It was procedural. He sent the message while I stayed on the phone. Alicia. I've scheduled the transfer. It should clear tomorrow morning. We waited. Her response came within seconds. Not minutes. Seconds. That's amazing news. I'm so proud of you. Proud. That word again. Reinforcing trust. Strengthening the illusion. Daniel stared at the message. I don't even recognize her now, he said quietly. But that wasn't true. This was always who she was. The version he met was the illusion. This was the reality underneath. Sandra called again later that afternoon. Everything is in place, she said. What does that mean? I asked. It means she believes the money is coming. Sandra paused. And people who believe they're about to receive money behave differently. Differently how? They expose themselves. Patterns change. Caution fades. Preparation begins. Movement accelerates. She would likely begin preparing to leave. Closing accounts. Packing belongings. Disconnecting herself from anything traceable. Predators never stay where they hunt. Daniel texted me that evening. She wants to celebrate tomorrow. Dinner at my apartment. Celebrate. Before the money had even arrived. That told us everything. She wasn't celebrating the relationship. She was celebrating the outcome. Sandra agreed. That's when it will happen, she said. When she feels safest. Safe enough to stay. Safe enough to relax. Safe enough to stop looking for danger. Because danger, to her, didn't exist. She believed Daniel was the victim. She believed she was in control. She believed she had already won. But she didn't know something yet. She didn't know the account she was waiting on was already being monitored. She didn't know investigators were already building the case. And most importantly, she didn't know Daniel had never sent the money. The next morning, at 7:14 a.m., Daniel sent her the final message. The transfer is complete. Her reply came instantly. I knew you trusted me. But what she didn't know was that less than 2 hours later, there would be a knock on his apartment door. And it wasn't going to be him. At 8:03 a.m., Daniel was making coffee when someone knocked on his apartment door. Not loud. Not aggressive. Precise. Controlled. The kind of knock that doesn't ask for attention. It assumes it. He froze. Because Alicia wasn't supposed to arrive until noon. The knock came again. 3 times. Daniel walked toward the door slowly, his heart beginning to pound harder with every step. He looked through the peephole. 2 people stood in the hallway. A man and a woman. Both calm. Both patient. Both holding badges. Daniel opened the door halfway. Daniel Whitaker? The woman asked. Yes. She held up her identification. My name is Sandra Klein. We spoke through your father. He nodded, relief and tension colliding inside him at the same time. It's time, she said simply. Behind her stood another investigator Daniel didn't recognize. What happens now? He asked. Sandra glanced briefly down the hallway. We wait. Wait. That was the final step. Because Alicia believed the transfer had already happened. She believed she was walking into a celebration. Not an ending. Sandra and her partner stepped inside the apartment. They moved quietly. Professionally. No wasted motion. Daniel's phone buzzed. A message from Alicia. On my way. I can't wait to see you. Sandra looked at the screen. Perfect, she said. She positioned herself near the living room but out of sight from the door. Her partner stood near the kitchen. Daniel remained exactly where he would have been anyway. On the couch. Waiting. At 11:58 a.m., footsteps approached the door. Light. Confident. Then the sound of keys. She had a copy. Another calculated move. Control of access creates psychological ownership. The door opened. Alicia stepped inside. She was smiling. Radiant. Victorious. She closed the door behind her and turned toward Daniel. There's my investor, she said playfully. Investor. Not boyfriend. Not partner. Investor. The truth, hidden in plain sight. She walked toward him. I was thinking we should take a trip, she continued. Celebrate properly. Maybe somewhere warm. Sandra stepped forward. Alicia Drummond. The smile vanished instantly. Not slowly. Instantly. Shock replaced it. Pure. Undeniable shock. Sandra held up her badge. I need you to stay exactly where you are. Alicia didn't move. Her brain was trying to catch up to reality. Her eyes moved to Daniel. Confusion. Then realization. Then betrayal. What is this? She asked. Sandra answered calmly. You are being investigated for financial fraud and solicitation under false representation. Alicia's breathing changed. Faster now. Shallow. This is a misunderstanding, she said quickly. The first defense. Denial. Sandra didn't react. "We have recorded evidence of your solicitation," she said. "Evidence removes negotiation. Evidence removes escape." Sandra's partner stepped forward. "Alicia Drummond, you are under arrest." The words landed with finality. Permanent. Irreversible. For the first time since Daniel had met her, Alicia looked afraid. Not calculated. Not composed. Afraid. Real. Her eyes locked onto Daniel. "You did this." He didn't answer. Because he didn't need to. The truth was already standing in front of her. Sandra gently but firmly secured her wrists. Professional. Controlled. Final. As she led Alicia toward the door, Alicia stopped. She turned back toward Daniel one last time. Her expression wasn't anger. It wasn't sadness. It was disbelief. Because predators never imagine becoming the prey. The door closed behind them. And just like that, she was gone. Daniel stood in the silent apartment. His hands were shaking. Not from fear. From release. 6 weeks of manipulation. 6 weeks of deception. Ended in 11 minutes. His phone buzzed. "Dad." He answered. "It's over," Daniel said. I closed my eyes. Not in relief. In certainty. Because justice doesn't always come quickly. But when it does, it arrives without hesitation. But what investigators discovered next was even more disturbing. Because Daniel wasn't her first victim. And he wouldn't have been her last. Hidden inside her laptop was a list of names. 8 more targets. And 3 of them had already sent the money. The apartment felt different after she was gone. Not quieter. Clearer. As if something invisible had finally lifted. Daniel stood in the center of the living room, staring at the door long after it had closed. Not because he expected her to come back. But because part of him was still trying to reconcile the 2 versions of the same person. The woman who had laughed with him on quiet evenings. And the woman who had just been led away in handcuffs. His phone buzzed again. This time, it was me. He answered immediately. "They took her," he said. His voice wasn't emotional. It was steady. Controlled. But I could hear the exhaustion underneath it. "Are you okay?" I asked. A pause. Then, "Yeah." Another pause. "I think so." That was the honest answer. Because betrayal doesn't end when the person leaves. It ends slowly. In layers. Over time. Investigators contacted us 2 days later. They had searched Alicia's laptop, her phone, and her financial records. What they found confirmed everything. And more. She kept detailed notes, Sandra told me over the phone. Notes. On people. On Daniel. On everyone. She tracked emotional progress, Sandra continued. When trust was established. When vulnerability appeared. When to introduce the investment. It was systematic. Clinical. Deliberate. Not impulsive. Not accidental. Designed. There were 8 confirmed victims, Sandra said. 3 had already transferred money. I closed my eyes briefly. How much? Just over $900,000. 900,000. Not numbers. Lives. Savings. Futures. Sandra continued. But Daniel was different. How? He stopped her. That mattered more than anything. Because predators rely on silence. And Daniel had broken it. 2 weeks later, Daniel came over for dinner. Just the 3 of us. Same table. Same kitchen. Same house. But everything had changed. Carol served the meal, and we sat together in comfortable silence. Not forced. Not fragile. Stable. After dinner, Carol went upstairs, leaving Daniel and me alone at the table. He held his coffee, staring into it. "I keep thinking about something," he said. "What?" He looked up. "The moment at dinner." I knew exactly which moment he meant. "When I squeezed your hand." I nodded. "That was the moment everything changed," he said. He wasn't wrong. Because that moment wasn't about suspicion. It was about trust. Trust in instinct. Trust in connection. Trust in reaching out. You listened, I said. He shook his head slightly. No, he said. You listened. We sat quietly for a moment. Rain tapped softly against the window. Familiar. Comforting. Normal. I almost ignored it, he admitted. That's the part most people never say out loud. Instinct speaks quietly. Logic argues loudly. And logic often wins. But not this time. You didn't, I said. And that was the difference. Not intelligence. Not experience. Choice. He had chosen to act. And that choice had saved him. Saved his future. Saved his life from a kind of damage that doesn't show on the surface but lasts for years. Before he left that night, he stopped at the door. Dad, he said.
Yeah.
He hesitated. Then smiled faintly. 3 squeezes still works. I smiled back. Always will. He left. And I stood there for a long time after the door closed. Not thinking about Alicia. Not thinking about the investigation. Thinking about something much simpler. How close everything had come to being different. How close we had come to losing everything. And how it had all come down to one small decision. One quiet signal. One moment of trust. Fraud doesn't begin with money. It begins with trust. And it doesn't end when the lie is told. It ends the moment someone chooses to question it. Daniel didn't stop her because he was smarter. He stopped her because he listened to the one voice most people ignore. The quiet voice that says, something isn't right. If you ever feel it, don't ignore it. Because that feeling might be the one thing standing between you and losing everything.